All right, today is August 13th, 2017. This is episode 108 of At Percussion. And today we are without our fearless leader, Casey Cangelosi. So you're stuck with all of the co-hosts today. I'm Megan Arns, and with us we have Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
And Laurel Black.
Hi.
And today we have a very special guest. And if you're a regular listener, you know that every once in a while we snag one of those major percussion icons for the show. And today we have one of those people. He's in the PAS Hall of Fame. He's a past PAS president, past principal percussionist and timpanist of the Marine Band and Rochester Philharmonic, as well as several other ensembles. He has many significant works in the percussion repertoire, and he is a significant part of what percussion education is today. There's so much more that we could say about this person, but let's just stop here and welcome Mr. John H. Beck, also known as JB.
Thank you, Megan. That's a very nice introduction. And you mentioned this might be your first introduction because the person who does it is not there, but you do it well. So you got a good job now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's also very special for me to have you on this podcast because although you weren't my main percussion teacher at Eastman, I took the History of Percussion course with you at Eastman. And for those of you who have not been a student at Eastman before, everyone knows GB, and he's so present at the scene in Eastman, and he's at all of the percussion concerts, and he teaches this incredible History of Percussion course where that touches on a lot of the important people in the history of percussion, important instruments, and yeah, it's a great class. And man, you are the person to learn from about the history of percussion. So I definitely enjoyed that.
Well, thank you for that little PR thing there. If anyone out there wants to take my class, just tell them they can join. It's something I always wanted to do, but never had time to do when I was playing full-time in the Rochester Philharmonic and teaching full-time at the school. So now that I've retired, I retired from 49 years of teaching in 2008, but I've been teaching the history class now every semester, every year in the first semester up until now, and I hope I have another class this year. I've already sent out feelers, but it's a lot of fun for me. And usually I send out a little note reminding the incoming freshmen about this class. And one freshman wrote back, I won't name the person, but he said something I think is kind of profound. And that is, he said, I'm really looking forward to the History of Percussion class because all through high school, I was only concerned about playing and never thought about the heritage, the history. And I'm looking forward to it. And that meant a lot to me when I met him. It is important.
That's really great. It's very important. I agree.
Nice to know what took place before, so what's going on now will have a little more meaning.
Yeah, I took that same sort of class with Bill Mersch at the University of Illinois, and again, learning all that stuff really does put things today into perspective. And with you or Professor Mersch both, it's so interesting taking a class with someone that's lived through so much of it, I think. It wouldn't be the same if I was teaching that class because I wasn't there for when Merlin was premiered.
Well, I know a lot of the things that I say in that class, you all can get on Wikipedia, you can get on Google. I mean, I'm not telling any secrets, but because of my age, a lot of the things we talk about in history, I've experienced. I've been there and part of it. So I can shed some personal feelings about the class. I think that means a little more to them. And I can just say, well, yeah, I was there when that happened, and this is what it was really like.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Pianists don't get to do that with Beethoven. I had a question. We were talking about your teaching at Eastman for 49 years as full-time, and before we started recording, I was remarking that Mr. Beck is my, I guess you could call it grand teacher. My teacher studied with him, and Megan's grand teacher as well. And Mr. Beck's former Eastman students, I think other than Alan Abel, no one can really even come close to the sort of output you had with Steve Gadd, Lee Howard Stevens, Michael Burritt, Nexus, and all these people. So could you tell us a little bit about what, in your experience, it is that makes a successful student successful in the long run?
Okay, I auditioned 1,684 students.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
How did you come up with that number?
Well, because I wrote a book called Percussion Matters, and I saved every audition report.
Oh my gosh.
Anders Estrand talked about on his episode that you could go to Mr. Beck's office and say, what was Steve Gadd's lesson like the third week of classes in 1972, and he could pull out the record.
I can do that. It's not in my studio anymore because Michael Burritt took that over and he took my place. But I have a warehouse and I have a box of all of those. But out of those 1,684 students, I only accepted 258. Now, those 258 that I chose to study here were obviously talented. And the more talented the student is, the easier my job is, because I could advise, I could direct, suggest. I was never a cloner. I never said to any student, you must do it this way. I always said, this is the way I do it. Try it. And if it works for you, use it. If not, we'll go on to something else. So that was my whole idea in teaching. The cloning part was never something I believed in. And now, going back to those students, what makes them good student? My first class was Steve Gadd, Bill Kahn, and Ruth Kahn. That was in 1968. And they all did pretty well.
I'd say.
They all, as I told the students many times, the better you are, the better I look. So keep making me look good. And that's really what it's all about. So we're talented. There's an audition process like you all went through. And the process here, as Megan knows, it's difficult. But once you're here, you've proven that you belong here, and then you just grow. You just grow on your own. Self-instruction is still one of the best examples of teaching that I can think of. I will guide, but the student has to know what they can do, how it feels. Don't try to play like someone else. Play like yourself. That's, I think, is very important.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I've got the book right here, Percussion Matters. You guys should all read it if you haven't yet. I just wanted to read an excerpt from the jacket. It says, quotations from John Beck's students, excerpted from Percussion Matters. Shakespeare said that brevity is the soul of wit. I believe it is also the soul of wisdom. These are some of the plain-spoken, intuitive, encouraging, and truthful words I treasure that John Beck said in his gracious, unassuming manner when I was fortunate enough to be his student at Eastman. The people who can't let go of their mistakes don't stay musicians. Rhythm is inside. Feel it, trust it. It's better to let someone else sing your praises than to do it yourself. Playing is only part of it. What kind of person someone is counts for a lot. When I walk on stage, I leave the world behind and all of its worries.
Well,
I love that. Well, that's great. But this book is great also because there are some beautiful pictures in it, and student quotations, and also like a listing of all the students, right, Mr. Beck, in the back, the graduates. Yeah, it's quite a list of names.
And I think I read that all the proceeds go towards a composition prize. Is that correct?
No, they go to the John H. Beck Scholarship Fund.
Okay.
Each year, Michael, my successor, Michael Burritt, chooses someone that he thinks is worthy of the money. It's not a lot of money, but it's enough to buy a cup of coffee and a donut somewhere, I'm sure. No, it's a little more than that. But that's it. The composition thing you're talking about is something that Mike and Bill have here. It's every other year. It's not something that happens every year, but it's an event. It takes place on a weekend. There have been two of them so far, and that's the John Beck Composition Prize.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So, JB, I often see your name on Days of Percussion and on the adjudicator list for international festivals and just all over the place. It seems like you're very active still, adjudicating and presenting and sometimes performing. It's amazing that you're so active in the percussion world. So great for us. Can you tell us what some of your current projects are and where you've been recently, and maybe kind of this summer or just in the recent past, what you've been up to?
Yes, I can. 2016, I was in Europe 6 times. I was in Poland twice. I was in St. Petersburg, Russia. I was in China, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. And I was in Italy. And I don't know if that's 6. I may have missed something here. But anyway, that was a busy year. Now, This summer, I've not had anything to do. But coming up in October, I am now the advisor for a percussion group in Hong Kong. And I advise them on teaching rhythm to anyone. They've devised an app called Boom Boom Bach. It's an app on the internet. It's mainly for young people. The premise of the whole thing is that between the ages of 4 and 8, perhaps, a young child learns quickly languages and so on. Mm-hmm. So you can teach this young child a little bit about rhythm by this app that they've developed. And if you can do that, when the child gets to be 10, which is not the only place that you start an instrument or age, but at around 10, that rhythm will be instilled within them somehow. So when they get a clarinet in their hands and they see all these different fingerings, rhythm will be part of their life, and all the technical part of learning the instrument is all they concentrated on. When I started learning to play percussion, I didn't know anything about rhythm. All I wanted to do was play the drum. Mm-hmm. And when I realized what rhythm was and why I needed to know more about it, then my life moved on a lot quicker. So that's one of my projects. And I will be going back to Poland to do some workshops. And at my age, keeping busy is important, believe me. I don't want to get up in the morning and not know what to do. I'm going to get up in the morning and I want to have something to do. So I have a little routine. I come here in my little man cave where I am right now, which I call this little, I don't know, Megan, if you've ever seen this little studio I have here.
It's it's across the street from the main building, right?
Yeah, it's Messinger Hall.
Messinger, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next to Java's. Well, anyway, I come here, I practice for about 45 minutes on a drum pad. I do email, and I've just written a book on rhythm that's going to be part of the app. I've also developed for this company in China 5 videos based on me performing rhythmic things and understanding it, and words and rhythm and melody and rhythm and so on. So I keep busy, and I enjoy it. I really like to play drums, and I enjoy not only playing all the instruments in the percussion world, but I enjoy the people I deal with. One time, I don't want to talk too much here, but one time.
No, this is great.
You know the name Charlie Wilcoxon.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Charlie Wilcoxon. I toured with a Marine band, and I did 4 tours between 1955 and 59. Those were 9-week tours, brutal tours, 2 concerts a day, 7 days a week, no days off, and no bathrooms on the buses. That was tough.
Oh, man.
Those were really brutal. So it gave
probably no air conditioner on the buses either, right?
Nothing. And one of the tours was during the South, and our uniforms after 9 weeks they'd open the bunks, and everyone just kind of moved away for a while. The air got
they were a little ripe by the end.
It was really right. So I did those tours, but one time we played in Cleveland, and I was not an entrepreneur. I never knew what the word entrepreneur meant until you young people brought it into my vocabulary. But when I would get into a new town, and it was a new town every day, I would go to the percussion shops. There used to be drum shops around, like Charlie Wilcox and Frank's Drum Shop in Chicago, Carol's in New York, and so on, and introduce myself. Not that I wanted them to know, hey, I'm John Beck, I play drums. I just wanted to know my name. So maybe someday we'll get together again.
Yeah.
And it paid off. But in the future, you all have to be entrepreneurs now. In those days, we didn't have to do that. We just kind of played the instrument to let things happen. But getting back to Charlie Wilcoxon, I went down, watched him give a lesson one time. And the thing that really impressed me, this kid came in, played through probably a Wilcoxon swing solo. Charlie said, okay, now I want you to play this solo with no sticks. I want you to pantomime the whole thing for me. I thought, wow, this is something different. So I watched this kid pantomime one of his solos, and it made sense. It was the old style where your hands are moving up and down very freely, sort of like swimming. And he had a book in his studio that we all signed. Anyone that come to his studio would sign the book, and I wrote in there, I really enjoy being in the percussion world and meeting people like you, or something like that. But it was an experience that I never forgot. And that's where it is.
Right.
I like percussion. I like meeting all of you, talking to all of you. It's fun.
Yeah. It's so interesting that it's, going to a drum shop and introducing yourself in person, whereas, sometimes we even forget to do that today. We send emails and we connect on Facebook and social media. And of course we meet each other at PASIC and things like that. But, in terms of just like being in a new city and finding the drum shop, like you said, we don't do that as much.
It's the personal contact. And that's why the history of percussion class, if I can interject some personal information about the experience, it means more than a little email on your computer.
Right.
Of course.
Yeah. And I mean, even with the history of percussion class, like an online class versus face-to-face interaction once a week, what do you think about that? Have you had any experiences with online courses before, or?
Well, no, but I'm about ready to.
Are you doing one?
There's a thing called Mastermind Lounge.
Okay.
That's it's not only music, but it's everything you can think of, from sports to medicine to Mastermind. We are all masters of our trade, so to speak. And it hasn't launched yet, but it's a friend of mine here in Rochester. He's sort of a closet drummer. He's a lawyer, a very good one, but he plays drums. And he got this idea, and he's been sponsoring it. Some of the people who are on musically would be Bill Kahn is on, Brian Stotts, Anders Ostrand from Sweden, and me, and some others. But I will then be part of the online. It hasn't happened yet. I gave one lesson as a test, and it worked.
Good.
But in the class, in the history class, it's interesting to me to see, and I'm sure you experience this also, everyone has to talk. They have to make a report every class that I assign. And it's usually the first class, everyone's timid. They don't know each other. So anything that comes out of their mouth is really kind of like they're apologizing for it, so to speak. But as the class moves on, pretty soon they become great orators, and there's like they got a great thing to say. And I think that helps them, because the more comfortable they feel doing that, the more comfortable they're going to feel playing Scheherazade or Lieutenant Kiji or anything like that, because it's nothing more than a conversation. Music is nothing more than a conversation.
Right.
So it's fun.
One thing I'm so afraid of for the future is that online classes, in my experience, are not good. And I'm very afraid of the fact that it's much more economical to sit at home and go to college, quote unquote, online, versus going to a class. And in particular with music, I think running into people in the halls and bouncing ideas off of each other is so different from just sitting in a practice room alone. And I make the point to my students often that you could just practice at home and we could do lessons over Skype, and it'd be probably a lot cheaper for all of us. We'd save gas money, better for the environment or whatever. But I think it's still so relevant to actually be at a university with other students. And I don't know, I didn't really have any question. I just wanted to sort of interject my 2 cents there. There's certainly, I mean, we're doing an online thing right now. There's certainly merit to doing online things, but I hope that it never fully replaces the sort of in-person interaction. And in so many words, I don't want what Amazon has done to stores to happen to education.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I agree with you 100%. The personal contact is very, very important. I know it's cheaper over the internet. You don't have to pay the tuition. You don't have to pay the dormitory fees and all that sort of thing. But it doesn't replace the real thing of the one-on-one, the conservatory concept, a European idea of one-on-one. That's very important.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, they do say you get what you pay for, right? So
that's it, Laurel.
I have a question for you, JB. This comes from one of our listeners on Facebook. And since you were just talking about, you know, your career all the way back to Marine Band into now you're still trying new things, like you're going to try this online course for a friend of yours for the first time. Alex Schallenberger would like to know, have you dealt with burnout in your career, and what have you done to recover from it, or have you ever done anything to actively avoid getting burned out?
I never thought much about burnout. Let me just describe what my life was like when I was here at this Eastman School and playing in the orchestra. It was a 24/7 work week. I never had time to think about burnout because I had so many obligations that I had to fulfill that burnout never got in. Oh, sure, there were days that weren't as much fun as other days, but no, I never really experienced burnout. Did I want to do other things sometimes? Yes. And I remember talking to Al Abel about burnout way back in the that would have been 1951, 52, something like that. And we all, from time to time, any one of you and anyone, I think that is a teacher, is going to experience days when they don't want to teach. And that, if that's what you want to call burnout. But I think that's very natural and normal for the human being to get days like that. But looking ahead, looking at your obligations, there's really not time for burnout. Right now, obviously, I have a really great retirement. And in what I do as an alternate to what I'm doing now is I make wine. I actually have a wine cellar and I make wine. Maybe Megan has had some of it. I don't know.
I have.
Okay. Well,
I won a bottle in the, remember the NCAA tournament bracket?
Yeah.
I have a bottle. From that.
See,
Yes.
I can't sell the wine, but I can give it away. When people do good things, I give them a wine. Or if they do something for me, if the IT guys here at Eastman get me out of a computer problem, I give a bottle of wine, and it's been a bartering chip for me. So that's become like another job. So I now have the Hong Kong, Shanghai job, along with my little wine job, and now the Mastermind Lounge. I don't have time to think about burnout. It just never occurred to me because I enjoyed it so much. And my teacher, William Street, who was a timpanist at the Rochester Philharmonic and also teacher at the school here, I asked him one day as probably a sophomore or freshman or junior, I said, how do you come in every day and play? He said, when I get on that stage, all I think about is the music. And that's a good attitude. When I start teaching, all I'm thinking about is the student and the teaching. And do I have time to think of burnout? not really.
You know, you say you're retired, JB, but with everything you said you're doing, I think a lot of people might say you're not retired.
I look at it this way, Laurel. I have another job. I'm still here on the faculty in the first semester, but I just have another job. Mike Burritt does all the work. He does all of that teaching, and he does all the conducting and organizing. And now Brian Stotts is here. He's the percussion tech. And I have a pretty easy job. I can sort of schedule my life daily as I choose, except for some obligations that come up. So.
Well, it sounds like you are sustainable, but Will Marinelli, this is another Facebook question. He's curious about the percussion world. So you are sustainable, but what do you think is the key to sustainability for the percussion world going forward?
When I came to Eastman, the main thing we had to learn was snare drum, timpani, and marimba. And we had to learn quality sounds on those instruments, and we had to learn the orchestral repertoire. That was pretty much it. There was no percussion ensemble here. There was a marimba ensemble that Gordon Peters started in 1954, and I was part of that. But there was no percussion ensemble. Yes, we would get together once in a while and make some noise together, things like that. And they
there also wasn't a whole lot of percussion ensemble rep, even if you did have one.
Well, right. So, you know, it was a whole different world. Now, and we were taught to be orchestral musicians. That was it. No one knew about what was going on beyond that. But then, as you all know, in the 1951 University of Illinois, Paul Price started the first accredited percussion ensemble in college. And from there, things just kept building and building. And it wasn't until 1962 that we actually had a percussion ensemble that got credit here at Eastman. I fought for it earlier in that for 2 years, and finally I guess they got tired of listening to me say we need this, and they gave us credit. And now coming into the Eastman School of Music, now students have to know so much more than I had to know, or Al had to know. We only had to know that there was Beethoven, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, and so on. But now, there's all of this percussion ensemble music that is extremely difficult, particularly in the mallet section. That's really difficult. I know Bill Kahn and I sit at many of these recitals and concerts that they play here, and we look at each other at the end of the evening and say, you know, they played more notes at this concert tonight than you and I played in our lifetime. That's pretty much.
I don't know about that.
Well, I think so. No, 2 mallets were the big thing when I was here. 4 mallets was something that we didn't even know about. A few people like Peter with 4 mallets because he studied with Claire Omar Musser in Chicago. So he came to school with that knowledge. Honestly, my first drum lesson when I was 10, first lesson was how to hold the drumsticks. Second lesson was how to change the head, a skin head, on a hoop. Because his idea was, well, if the head breaks, what good are the drumsticks, even if you know how to hold it? You have to know how to repair the drum. He gave me 13 lessons and said, I don't know anymore. But he was really a house painter. But he had a snare drum. He played in the fife and drum corps in the local town. So when I came to Eastman, I auditioned on snare drum, a little bit of piano, and that's pretty much it. I never auditioned for the percussion teacher. I auditioned for the theory teacher.
Okay. Wow.
Much different. Students are coming now for auditions playing things that many of us played when we graduated or never could play at that point in our life. But it's totally different now, and it has to be different because percussion is accelerating rapidly. And what's going on here at Eastman, Juilliard, Curtis, New England, and so on, it's really appropriate because the orchestral business is not necessarily that. It's solid, but it's a fickle thing. Sometimes you can't make a living just playing in an orchestra. So you need to do things like soul percussion, Nexus, Alarm Will Sound, American Ensemble. All of these little groups, I think that's where percussion is going. They are becoming what's happening earlier in the strings, like a string quartet. Now you've got percussion quartets, and it's time. And that they have to prepare for it, and that's what they're doing very successfully. And sometimes I wonder when I see how much they have to learn for a new composition. I wonder when they study. I just can't imagine the time that it takes to learn something academically and the time it takes to learn something technically or musically. It's a lot of time, and you can't go from one to the other. If you're going into say you have an hour of practice and you just came from a heavy-duty academic course and you carry all of this baggage in your head, it's going to take 10, 15 minutes to clear the air so that you start playing something that means something. And that's it. You just can't walk from one to the other. So you have to pace yourself and schedule yourself very, very carefully. But it's important. It's where these kids are going. And I'm so glad that I shared all of this, but I certainly don't think I would feel comfortable. I know I wouldn't feel comfortable having to learn what they have to learn right now. I improvise now. That's the main thing. It's all this baggage I've heard over these 49 or 50 years. Now, I can play Tanaka, sure. So I don't play the right note, but I play the right rhythm.
Improvisation on Tanaka.
Yes. And things like that. Because I know I've said sometimes, I see a student working on a piece that I know they shouldn't be playing, but they insist they want to play. And after about a month of this, I say, look, you're wasting your time because I can play it and I never practiced it. And I'd play a little bit jokingly to get my point across that maybe they should not try to play something that they heard someone else play. They should play things that they can play comfortably and do it. That's the important thing.
Yes, definitely. Ben, you have something for us?
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about sort of changes over the years. And one of the biggest changes we've touched on the podcast before that I'd like to bring to light here and hear Mr. Beck's thoughts on it is the educational administration costs are now skyrocketing. And I found a little blurb. It's from the National Center for Policy Analysis. It's an article by Farhad Mirzadeh. Pardon the butchered pronunciation of the name, but I'd like to just read a little excerpt of it. It says, colleges have seen huge increases in the number of people on their staffs. From 2000 to 2012, the public and private education workforce increased by 28%. The rise in administrative staff, Mirzadeh notes that colleges have hired 87 administrative and professional workers every day from 1987 to 2012, means that colleges have to spend more money on salaries, benefits, and pensions. And growing numbers of administrative staff are not the only thing that schools are spending money on. Colleges are spending gobs of money renovating their campuses and building luxury dorms. Mirzadeh says the rise in administrative spending has led colleges to cut instruction costs by hiring increasing numbers of adjunct, part-time faculty to teach various classes. Today, half of the higher educational faculty consists of adjunct professors. Mirzadeh contends that this trend is bad for education because adjunct faculty tend to work other jobs and have less time for students or course preparation. So my question to Mr. Beck here is, what are your thoughts on how administration has kind of ballooned in academia? Has it been for good purpose? Is it people on top taking advantage of the people on the bottom and so on? And I know that probably all of us can speak to the fact that adjunct teaching, while it can serve a purpose, is not usually the best, most ideal solution. And I know that I have taught adjunct, and I am now full-time, luckily. And I will say that it is not a good system to have adjunct applied instructors.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, okay, Ben. It was not important when I went to school in the 50s to get a degree, a higher degree. Like, a bachelor's was fine. I think my predecessor had a high school degree. I have a master's. Now, doctorate degrees are the norm. People must get a doctorate degree. Now, what does that mean? Are they better than me or my predecessor because they now have a doctorate degree? Probably a little bit better, at least intellectually. They know more about what they're doing. But one of the drawbacks that I've seen over the years is that many of these DMAs have now priced themselves out of the job market because it's cheaper for a college to get someone to come in and teach as an adjunct professor. Therefore, they don't have to pay retirement, they don't have to pay health benefits, and they don't have to do a lot of things like that, the amenities. So sometimes the advanced degrees are just degrees that are absolutely necessary, but sometimes work in the reverse because you can't get a full-time job. I'm not sure if that's what you were thinking of, but the adjunct professor, it's like a family. When I was the teacher here at Eastman, every year I had a family of 20 students, and that was my family. And then that would change over the years. People would go away. They move away. It's just like, none of you are married, or maybe you are, I don't know, but one of these days you'll get to have a family, and your kids will get to be 18 years old, and they'll move away. But that's what it's like teaching. So if you're an adjunct, it's like having an uncle going to raise you, or an aunt's going to raise you. You'd really need the parent to guide you and give you support, and someone you can reflect back on. So I don't believe that adjuncts are that beneficial, but I know they are used quite often because of the things that I mentioned, the monetary things. Did I kind of hit on the point you were thinking of? Or?
Yeah, well, that was part of it, but I was also wondering just about your thoughts on the sort of ballooning of university administration and what has caused that. What has caused them to need so many more administrators for the same amount of students? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I actually, my wife could probably answer that question because she is the executive assistant to the CEO of the Rochester Philharmonic. And she has watched the reverse of this happening. The orchestra is reducing the number of administration, causing stress for those who are left. Now, I've never been an administrator. I never wanted to be an administrator. So I'm not sure I can give you any in-depth knowledge about this, but I do know maybe it's with all the computers and the different departments that they need to run. Maybe they just need that. But I do know that more is probably better than fewer in this case, that they need something like that to keep it. I'm sorry, I just probably can't really.
No, it's okay. I was just
too deeply. Administrative, yes, my department, but it was just me. I was a benevolent dictator, if you want to call it that, something like that.
Ben, this topic comes up often with my family for some reason. Like they want to talk about higher ed and the cost of higher ed. And I find that I have to remind them, like, it's not because faculty are like getting paid astronomically, right? I just remind them that it's going to these causes that I'm not quite sure where they come from, whether there's like all this new paperwork or something for financial aid or from the government. I don't know. I just know every time I see a new building on campus, it feels like something inside of me like dies a little bit. I'm like, no, because it means tuition's got to go up, or every time they renovate a dorm, you're like, no. Or they renovated the dining hall, which was only like 20 years old anyway, because they said it would attract more students. Like, what? No.
Yeah, and now we're seeing the trend in enrollment go down, you know. Our schools, I'm sure you guys are in a similar boat, but, you know, we're having massive, you know, downward trend in enrollment just because there are less people that age going to college. I mean, the baby boomer generation is over, and I think that this is an expected trend, but I think a lot of schools, you know, didn't really plan for it as well. And, you know, instead, like you said, we're building new dorms and renovating things and building these luxury student apartments, but there are less students.
Yeah. Or they are expecting that the rising cost, that people wouldn't wake up or something. Like that parents wouldn't eventually start to say, you know, you don't have to go if it's $30,000 a year. We could just wait till you are really sure you want to go.
Well,
right.
If you're in music, you're sure you want to go. That's one thing about going to a music school. There's no liberal arts concept here. You know what you want, and you're focused, or at least you should be focused, because otherwise you're wasting money. But Megan, you said something about maybe they didn't prepare for it, or maybe Laurel said that. I don't know. I know that the Eastman School has that new East Wing now. Uh-huh. But historically, that goes back to 1921, when that was what George Eastman could not buy, and there was an apartment house there. And the owner would not sell it to Eastman, so he built the Eastman School around it. And then when this property became available at Eastman School or university bought it, and then they built what George Eastman actually had in mind. So that's how this school. Mm-hmm. But you're right. I see here in the computer, I'm still on the inner circle as far as administration goes, and when someone comes in, someone moves. But is it the millennials now? We've had this discussion about they move a lot. No one stays in one job too long. I mean, I stayed in a job a long time because that's where I wanted to be. But I've seen here someone will stay maybe a year and then move on to another position, and then someone else comes in. I see that in one way as being counterproductive, because that person who just moved in is going to take a couple months to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Now, you don't do that in orchestras necessarily once you get in. But you all know that Scheherazade goes a certain way. And if you move to another orchestra, it would be the same Scheherazade, better maybe, or worse. You never know.
Good point.
But it's the same music. And I said that to someone many years ago. I said, you're in the Chicago Symphony, and you play Scheherazade, and you make a lot of money. I'm in a Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra. I play Scheherazade. I don't make that kind of money, but it's the same notes and the same responsibility that we each need to share. And that's something that you have to just understand if you're a musician, that you do need this quality to your playing, and it has to be you are your instrument. I mean, let's face it, the better you are, the better you're respected, the better you sound. It's not someone else necessarily telling you what to do. You know what to do.
Yeah.
Important thing.
I had a little funny anecdote to sort of close up the adjunct teaching topic, and JB mentioned it feels like you're being taught by your uncle and you need your parent there. I have my last job, which I just completed my first year at my new job in Texas here. My last job, I was adjunct, and I have a student that, after 1 year of me not being there, has decided now to transfer out and finish his last 2 years with me here. And the band director, who was partially responsible for, I think, this sort of administrative structure where there were so many adjuncts being abused, he pulled this student into his office, and he was kind of trying to talk him into staying, and he said, well, what are you going to do if Ben leaves that job? And my student said, well, I'll probably follow him to the next place he goes. So I think that the adjunct thing is thought of as like this great solution for, oh, we can, get instruction done on the cheap, but at what cost? And you can lose so many students because there's no sort of tenure structure there, and students aren't tied to any university in particular. And like you said, like millennials are not afraid to move. They'll leave. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's just a different lifestyle. I would have stayed in a Marine band for 20 years. I got in 1955, in 59 I got out. But honestly, at the time, the leader was not good, and morale was kind of faltering. And I just looked ahead, and I said, I don't want this. I want to play music, but I don't want to be in a band. And those service bands are still one of the best jobs if you want to be a player in an orchestra or a band, because you get all kinds of, you don't make a lot of money, but you have so many perks. The hospitalization, and you get retirement, and then you get what they call the PX, where you go buy goods. It's good living if you can if you really don't mind the military concept of saluting and all that stuff. I didn't. I loved being a Marine. I had a lot of fun. 4 years doing the tour. I got to see people, got to meet people. But I would have stayed 20, except, fortunately, it's called being in the right place at the right time. Here's a quick scenario. In 1935, the first graduate of the Eastman School of Music was Oliver Zinsmeister. He was a percussion graduate in 1935. He went into the Marine Band, and he stayed for 20 years. And maybe you know the name Charles Owen. Charles,
yes.
Yeah, was Ollie Zinsmeister and Charles Owen were called the Dream Team. They both played mallet. They were the big mallet players in the band. Well, in 1955, Ollie's time was up. That was 20 years. And that's when I graduated. I auditioned, and I took Ollie's place in the Marine Band.
Okay.
So it went from Eastman to Eastman. And then when I came back in 1959, I took Bill Street's place. Well, not until 68, but he was sort of phasing out then. So I was in the right place at the right time. I didn't plan it that way, but I took advantage of what happened.
Yeah.
I moved around, but I moved in a straight line. I didn't go up and down to different things.
Yeah.
So.
I've heard you say that multiple times, being in the right place at the right time. But still, I mean, you just had such an amazing career, and there are so many factors that play into that. And I know you don't have Facebook, so I have to share a comment that someone posted. It wasn't a question, but it comes from Steve Fitch. He said, JB is a legend. He's been everywhere, done that, had a hand in so many players' lives. But if you could have seen him play those kettles with RPO, magic.
Well, Steve's a very nice man. Thank you, Steve, wherever you are.
And yes, also, JB, you've had so many students. We talked about how many students you've had in the very beginning of the podcast. And someone we've talked about on the podcast before is Steve Gadd.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a Facebook question that involves Gadd. It's from Brett Morris, and he's asking, how is Steve Gadd an influence for Sonata for Timpani? And maybe that question could be a jumping off point to telling us about your experience with Steve and your relationship with him as, I am assuming a friend and mentor now, but also as a student at Eastman.
Well, I first met Steve in a music store across the street from the Eastman School of Music. He was probably 14. He was in there. And at the time when I started teaching early on, for the first 2 years, from 59 to 62 or somewhere in there, I didn't have that many students. So I was an adjunct, or I would go out and teach at music schools and so on. So I found Steve in this music store. And I said, hey, you need to come over and study with me in the preparatory department at the Eastman School. And he did all through high school. He was always an inspiration. I would go out and hear him play. He was a as you know, he's a great drum set player. But he's also, his roots were in drum corps. He played in the Crusaders here, and he was into the Wilcoxon things and Conquering the Legions of Rome. I think that's a John Pratt solo. We used to play that together in lessons. So Steve was here through high school. And then he said to me when he was graduating from high school, I'm going to go to New York. I want to be there. And so I talked to Paul Price, who was teaching at Manhattan, and I said, hey, this is a good student. You really will enjoy him. He went to Manhattan, studied with Paul Price for 2 years, and then got kind of disillusioned by what was going on there. I don't remember all the details. I said, okay, come on back and study with me. You'll be a junior. And that was how he got back to Eastman. He's from Rochester. And then when he graduated, he needed something to play for his recital. He played a Handel Sonata. I remember that. He played this multiple percussion piece. I can't think of the name of it right now. It was one of the earlier ones. And he needed a timpani piece. I said, okay, I'll write one for you. So that was the incentive for me to write Sonata. I wanted a slow movement, and then I wanted the jazz-like section, and then I wanted the Latin section. And that was it. I wrote it. I'm certainly glad I did, because it's become quite popular, probably because his name's on it. That's what made it popular.
And your name.
But that was the beginning. And I have a tape of him playing that piece at his recital. And I keep in touch with Steve. I talked to him 2 weeks ago because I have his drums, his early drums. There are 4 of them. The little drum doesn't even have a trademark on it. He has a Black Beauty, and he has another Slingerland drum, and another one, I think it's another Ludwig drum, a gold one. And this was kept by his friend here in town. The guy who taught me how to make wine is also one of Steve's friends, and he's also a drummer. Let's face it, guys, there are drummers all over the world. Just
wow. Yeah, that's cool, though.
Everyone's a drummer. So anyway, I talked to Steve about his drums, and he said, well, get Brian to fix them. So Brian Stotts, the percussion tech here, cleaned them up, put new heads on, fixed up some of the hardware, and I called him about the drums. And Steve is going to be here with Chick Corea on October 13th. And unfortunately, and this is a real bummer, this is called being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm going to be in China at that.
No!
I can't be here when he's here for this thing. And I've talked to him about that. Oh, that's okay. You heard me play before. Yeah, but it's always a pleasure hearing him play. So that was it, Ben. That's how why I wrote the piece. It was really for him, for his senior recital.
Very cool. It's a great piece. Well, as we said, Casey couldn't be here today. He has another performance. But he left a few Facebook questions. Right. So to tie him into the conversation, one of those questions is, for new percussion professors such as ourselves, Laurel, Megan, Ben, and myself, do you have any advice regarding the job and how we should proceed towards benefiting the craft, our students, and ourselves?
You must, in some way, instill entrepreneurship into the young students. They have to know what this is. The marketing of their skills is very important, something that someone my age never had to do. You also need to keep up with all of the latest music from all of the publishers. Now, you can't play all of that. I mean, obviously, you'd never. But you have to study it a little bit enough to make sense when someone is playing it. You have to know what it sounds like or what it should sound like. And you have to develop within your students sort of a family or community type of department where they can learn not only from you, but from each other. I think that's very important. And you have to make them aware that the internet is here and it's very important, and their computer is something that they must learn, and most of them do. I mean, they're light years ahead of me now. A 4-year-old child's probably a light years ahead of me, but they have to be comfortable with that, and I'm sure that's something that would not be something you have to tell them. I think they already come with that. And you must, I think it's developed a camaraderie with your students. That's very important. Don't belittle the student, even if you know they're doing something totally wrong. Just try to tell them that it's wrong in a kind way, because once you say, "Hey, man, that sucks. That's terrible," you've already put a negative spot on your career with that student. And sometimes you just have to bite your tongue, even though you know it's not right. They will learn. They'll figure that out soon enough. Once you show them, or they hear someone else doing it, they'll know what to do. So it's the getting along with the students, knowing them personally, knowing their personalities, their concepts, their attitude about life. Because this one-to-one relationship, it's not that I want to say it's not natural, but that's not the right thing for me to say. It's a concept that colleges don't have. When you go to a class in English, there may be 200 students and one teacher. I mean,
Michael Rosa mentioned that as well, yeah.
Never know the teacher or most of the students. But now you are their surrogate mother or father. Whether they admit it or not, you really are that person. And they look up to you. I have had many students come to me with problems, and I always said, if you have a problem, come, let's talk about it. If I can shed some light, I will. If not, I'll maybe know someone who can. And over the years, there have been some difficult times. You have to be ready for that. You need to be able to handle it, because they're younger. When I started teaching full-time here, the students were younger than me, but not that much younger, maybe 10 years. But now, of course, if I talk to a freshman coming in, there's a lot of space between where they are and where I am right now. But it's the same attitude of this getting along. I think that's very important, and dealing with the administration. And my son does the same thing I do at the North Carolina School of the Arts. And he did a lot of adjunct teaching, because he was in a Marine band. When he got out, he did adjunct teaching all over the place. But now he has a full-time job, and he is constantly on committees. That you got to serve on committees. Fortunately, I served on only one committee in my whole life in 49 years. Don't ask me how I did it. I'm going to tell you.
That's impressive.
I kept saying, I'm too busy. I don't have time. I'm playing in the orchestra. And what I was doing was fulfilling George Eastman's original concept of the Rochester Philharmonic and the Eastman School. He said his principal players in the Philharmonic will be the teachers at the Eastman School. So I said, you want me to do this? I don't have time to serve on a committee. But I could never do it again. I don't know how I did.
That's pretty impressive.
Now,
that's why you're not burnt out.
Well, perhaps, committees take up a lot of time, and my son tells me about all the time he has to spend. And now Michael Burrett is the chair of the department. Right. I was asked to be the chair one time, and I said, no, I don't have time. So, anyway, that advice I give to all of you is
don't do committees.
Say no. No, but what you said about one-on-one teaching, even tying this back to our other conversation about funding in schools, it's like it's hard because the School of Music or Department of Music or whatever it is per that university, we're so expensive because we have one-on-one instruction. But at the same time, I think that's what makes it so worth it. In my limited years of teaching experience so far, the most rewarding part has been having that one-on-one contact for an hour every single week with those students, and really getting to know them as musicians and people. That's been the most rewarding part. So,
and that's one of the reasons why the administration sometimes looks at the salary that you get, whereas, say, Laurel teaches English, and she teaches 2 classes a week, and she hits or sees 400 students, and that's money. 400 students is money.
Yeah.
You see in that same period of time maybe 5 or 6 students.
Mm-hmm.
You're not making the college that much money.
Right.
That's why sometimes you have to fight for this, or at least discuss it very, very carefully with the administration that you are worth more, and prove the time that it takes you to practice and things like that.
Yeah.
That's one of the problems here at the Eastman School and the University of Rochester. Salaries. It's not so bad now, but when I joined, when Howard Hansen was here, the director, there was a great difference between salaries of the Eastman School and a professor at the university.
Ah, yeah.
Big time. And it was, since I've been here for 49 years, I saw the evolution to the point where there were no professors here at the Eastman School. They were called, what were they called? Artist teachers. That's what they were called. Mm-hmm. And then eventually they became professors, and then they had assistant, associate, full professor, tenure, and so on and so on. And now it's more equitable across the board. But there was a time pretty grim.
Yeah. Well, Laurel, you have a topic for us today?
I do. So today, my topic, everyone, I finished reading the remaining sections of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, just a few weeks ago. These 2 sections are experiences in a concentration camp and logotherapy in a nutshell. So for everyone, and including JB, just a review of kind of what this book is. Dr. Frankl is a survivor of the Holocaust, 4 different concentration camps, and upon liberation and continuing his work as a neuroscientist and psychotherapist, he came up with a type of therapy that seeks to help individuals identify their own meaning for their own lives, and giving them, as you said just a few minutes ago, JB, a straight line to move on rather than a curvy course, a straight line to follow. And he said there are 3 ways you can find that: creating a work, experiencing something or encountering someone, and then by adjusting the attitude you take toward your own suffering. And of course, viewed through the lens of a Holocaust survivor, especially that last one, takes on a whole new meaning. So in these 2 sections, the first one, experiences, he does take us through like quite a number of different moments, from the manuscript of his recent research paper being ripped from his hands when he exited the train at Auschwitz, to years later walking through camp gates on the day of liberation, being offered cigarettes by SS guards who had hurriedly changed into civilian clothes so they wouldn't be recognized by the Allies.
Wow.
Yeah, and he, that part of the book is quite long, and for right now, that's all I'm going to say about it. But it is really pretty extraordinary to read and to be reminded that the odds of survival at that time were 1 in 28.
Wow.
which is pretty remarkable. And in the book, he finishes by saying something like that, and then you just flip the page and he's like, here's my theory. It's just this total shift in mood and everything. Yeah. And I honestly had to put the book down for a few days and just like let all that settle and then continue on reading.
That's not light.
No, it's not. And so this logotherapy in a nutshell, which is the second section that I finished, very much just further describes the things that I talked about earlier when I discussed this book. And I think that was on Morris Palter's episode for anybody who might need a reminder. So I think that's episode 102. Not too long ago. Mm-hmm. But something he talks about when you are searching for your own meaning to give you direction is something he calls existential distress, which to me seems very related to burnout. When you start questioning, like, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? How do I compare to what others of similar age and experience are doing? And he makes a point to say that those kinds of thoughts are not synonymous with mental disease or depression or just weakness in character. Those are just thoughts that any person has when you're still searching for that line to keep you on that straight line, as JB said. Something I love from the book, beginning of a quote, he says, "Man is self-determining. What he becomes, he has made out of himself." Frankl describes logotherapy as being a focus on the future. That straight line goes forever in one direction and you can never see the end. Mm-hmm. And that the meaning of one's life is to fulfill something in times ahead. So it's not about a reflection of what you've done. It's not about what's happening right now and how do you feel about it, but it's allowing all these experiences, positive and negative, to kind of revolve around that straight line that you have that never gets disturbed. Two kind of closing quotes from this section of the book. The first one is an anecdote about how his idea of a search for meaning is not pessimistic. You're not running out of time to get your work done, whatever it might be, but it's instead very active. So here's his example. The pessimist resembles a man who observes with fear and sadness that his wall calendar, from which he daily tears a sheet, grows thinner with each passing day. On the other hand, the person who attacks the problems of life actively is like a man who removes each successive leaf from his calendar and files it neatly and carefully away with its predecessors, after first having jotted down a few diary notes on the back. He can reflect with pride and joy on all the richness set down in those notes, on all the life he has already lived to the fullest. What will it matter to him if he notices that he's growing old? Has he any reason to envy the young people whom he sees, or wax nostalgic over his own lost youth? No, thank you, he will think. Instead of possibilities, I have realities in my past. Not only the reality of work done and of love loved, but of sufferings bravely suffered. These sufferings are even the things of which I am most proud. And he closes the whole section with the following. Man is self-determining. What he becomes, he has made out of himself. After all, man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, he is also that being who entered those gas chambers upright, with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Israel on his lips.
Wow.
It's a really powerful, powerful book. And I was struck by two things, and anybody can jump in here at this point. I was like, I want to share this on the podcast, and I thought people are either going to think this has nothing to do with percussion. What are you doing? Which people might think a lot about my segments.
No. Not me.
Yay!
Helps tie it all together.
You know, or it could possibly create some sense of like, wow, well, I didn't survive anything like that, so why am I complaining or why am I stressed or whatever? And my feelings on that are that underneath what we are, what we label ourselves as percussionists, as artists. Underneath all of it, we're just humans, all living in the same world, but from our individual perspectives. And I think it becomes very important how you decide you relate to those experiences, in that they're certainly quite powerful. And something else you said, JB, that I might be taking a little out of context in this moment, but you were talking about, just preparing and the music you play. And this was when you were speaking about Scheherazade, but you said something like, the better you are, the better the music is, something like that. And to me, that's why it matters to think about such large ideas as a meaning or a personal purpose, because it makes you better as a human, which means your music is going to be better too.
Well done, Laurel.
Oh, thank you.
I agree.
I really enjoy, some of those things he said were very profound, and I can see where he's coming from, and I believe in some of those things, definitely. But for me, I'm so glad that I have been able to play music with others, for others, and make a living doing that. Because to me, that's really reassuring, and it keeps me on a straight line. I hope I'm 84 now. I don't know how much longer I'll be here on this earth, but I hope it's a long time, because I'm having such a good time now. I don't want to change this. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And that's the way I feel about the whole thing. And Percussive Art Society, I was there in the beginning.
Yeah.
Thing, and the first convention was here at Eastman in 1976. So I've been around it a long time, met a lot of people, still my friends, and it's a great society. It's a great business, and I wouldn't want to play another instrument. I think percussion is where I belong.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think even going back to talking about one-on-one students and working with students, and you never know where students are coming from, and you never know what their background is, or we might be able to assess it musically quickly, try to assess it musically quickly, but especially personally, sometimes it's a process of figuring out where they're coming from and how to relate to them. And we're all coming to this from different backgrounds, whether it's Frankl's experience, which I don't think any of us can fathom going through that. And I hate to assume that none of us have been through such a horrific experience before, but it's interesting that it's amazing that he's able to come to it with such a positive outlook. And actually, Laurel, I was thinking about you reading this book recently, because I was taking this, I know this sounds silly also, but I was taking this retirement class. I know I've got some time to go, but we have this wellness incentive here at my university. You guys might have something similar where you earn points. And there was this online class, and I said, I specifically was coming to it as looking how to save money and, how to start to save for retirement. And so I said, am I too young to take this class? And the woman said, no, you're the perfect age to take this class, because, you can learn about how to save for retirement. So I took the class, and there was a lot of positive psychology built into it. And there's actually a video that mentioned Viktor Frankl, and yeah, not to get back into that, but I just wanted to mention that it was cool to see that kind of come back around full circle. And the words that I wrote down while you were speaking is that it's darkly positive. I don't know. It's such this dark but light happening at the exact same time. And it's such a unique perspective. And then also to tie it together, I feel like I'm kind of just rambling here now, but my quote of the day, I get daily quotes of the day, and it is, you can't hit a home run unless you step up to the plate. You can't catch a fish unless you put your line in the water. And you can't reach your goals if you don't try. And even if we're not coming from a horrific experience like Viktor was, I think a lot of times people or students or ourselves are suffering from the inability to start something or the fear of failure. And I think it's a good lesson of just do it. Just try.
Yeah. That's good.
Cool. I like reading things like that too, especially when they turn out to be positive psychology, like you were saying. I feel like it does make me a better teacher, because then I'm trying to guide towards like helping the student find something true to say in what they're playing, instead of just do it like this because this is how it's done. Like, no, that's not as useful as you like figuring out yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
there's many ways to do the same thing. It doesn't have to all be done the same way all the time. And sometimes maybe the way that's never been thought of, it turns out to be the way that everyone now wants to start to do it. You just have to believe in yourself and not be arrogant about it, and just say, well, I'd like to try this. And who knows? Could be the next key to the success of some technical problem that's bugged us all for years, and now someone's figured it out. But in the meantime, we just keep trying to work our way into success. And the success has to be your success, not that, hey, I beat someone else out. No, that's not success. That's arrogance. It just has to be what you believe in and play like that. When Steve Gadd, I taught his son, the Duke. The Duke is Steve's son, his drummer also, and he studied with me through high school. And he came to me one day at a lesson, and he said, Mr. Beck. I said, yeah, Duke, what do you want? He said, do you think I should change my name? I said, well, I thought for a moment. I said, no, don't change your name, because his name is Steve Gadd. And the Duke is what they call him. But
I see. Okay.
I said, no, don't change your name. Just stop trying to play like your father and play like you want to play. And that was my advice to him.
Wow.
And he's doing well. I'm not sure where he is now. I think he's in New York somewhere playing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I visited the Zildjian factory last week, and I think he had just been there the day before.
Who, Steve or the Duke?
The Duke.
Oh, the Duke. Okay. He must have needed a symbol then.
I think it said that, Steve Gadd's son was in here. Yeah. So that's cool. You're on the wall there, Mr. Beck. I'm sure you know that.
I'm what?
You're on the wall there.
I'm on the wall?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Did you go into that? It used to be the sound room. They had Buddy Rich's drums in there.
Yeah.
Did you play them? I did.
I didn't get. We did a quick tour. So I spent a lot of time in the cymbal lab, like testing out things.
Okay.
But then we were starting to run out of time, and we did the whole tour. But I got to see that room. Yeah. I didn't get to play.
Well, when Armand was there, Zildjian, and then Lenny DiMuzio, they're such great guys, and they were. When you talk about marketing department, they were the marketing department of Zildjian. They were the hangers. They would hang with the guys. They would hang with Philly Joe and Buddy and Gene Krupp and Louis Belson. And that's how their marketing department was so successful. Now I think much of it is done over computer and websites and so on. But they would hang out till 2 or 3 in the morning with the artists.
Yeah.
That's something that not many people do now.
Well, that's kind of what you were talking about in the beginning of the episode. It was that personal connection.
Yeah.
Going into the drum shop and just introducing yourself, hanging out, spending time with people. And
whenever any group comes in here to Rochester, either jazz or symphonic, I always try to go say hello to the section. And when I was in St. Petersburg, Russia last May they then were here at Eastman. The orchestra was on a tour, And so I already knew the section, and we went over to Victoire, where that is, next to Eastman.
Of course.
And we did the Starovias with a little vodka, and we had a good time.
Excellent.
Yeah. So it was fun.
Cool.
So you make connections, and then sure enough, the circle comes around, the same thing, and you move on. And that's what life's all about. Meeting people, getting along with people, sharing your experiences. And I think that's what helps teaching.
Yeah. Well, we're about out of time here, and I think that those are perfect words to end on. And, this episode is packed with advice from you, and we really appreciate the time you spent with us. So thank you so much.
It's fun. Of course, I knew you before, but Laurel, man, I don't know if we've met before, but it's nice to see you. I hope we see each other again at a convention or somewhere. And Megan, when you get back in town, let me know.
Great, will do. Yeah.
So
I have another bottle of wine for you.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'll try to make that trip quick then. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We miss you, Casey. We'll see you on the next episode.
Tell me, to get out of this, all I do is push the red button, right?
That's right.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
again, JB. Bye, everyone.
You all.
Bye.
Bye.